Nobody is born racist. Society teaches it. If racism is intolerable, can we any longer afford to tolerate white privilege in the name of a world truly colourblind? Want to know why Trump happened? Well, we need to understand ideology and unconscious prejudice. An argument by John White. Welcome all. This note has taken some due consideration. It will be long, this isn't a short topic, and I can't address it soundly without considering many aspects. I will start with a news story, but decided for me that the time had come to take on this issue. British council worker claims discrimination after being sacked for branding Prince George white privilege. Article from The Independent. I made this post commenting about the story. What do I make of the Independent article? Well, Angela Gibbons is sincere in her beliefs. The problem is her beliefs are programmes, and she can't see past the programmes to realise the impact and offence of what she said. Is Prince George a symbol of privilege of whites over non-whites in the United Kingdom? How could suggesting such a thing not be offensive, if indeed not sound racist, i.e. a biased race determination, especially for those who just don't think in those terms and don't see themselves or their fellow Britons that way? How could it be fair to accuse a child of such a thing when there is no such intent? But, and this is no surprise, Angela also has shown strong views on the royal family. The 53-year-old later added, "I'm sound in my socialist, atheist and republican opinions. I don't believe the royal family have any place in a modern democracy, least of all when they live on public money. That's privilege, and it needs to end." Now, the argument as to whether Britain should be a monarchy or a republic will certainly be held when the current Queen dies. But where is the need to bring race into it? She's also wrong in the sense that the royal family is self-financing and gets back far less than it pays in to the Treasury via the civil list. There may be a case that land reform should be part of reforming the monarchy for the 21st century when the time comes for a new monarch. But that doesn't excuse an important civil servant directly criticising the Crown from a race card perspective, and I do agree her position is untenable. Of course civil servants have their own opinions, but there also comes the responsibility of the position to be responsible for voicing those opinions, and when this went public, her position with the British Council was fatally compromised. Extremist ideas are one thing, but the public doesn't care to pay for them. Neither will one woman losing her job solve the wider problem of the nature of the white privilege doctrine and its divisiveness. Now, this comment is made from the lens of being a patriotic British citizen. I don't especially want to get into that, except to say skin colour is irrelevant as to whether someone is British. It's the shared culture that creates that identity, and whether we tick the box for white British, black British, Asian British, or any other subdivided category, it's the box marked British British that counts. Even better, the promise of society we want to have. Free British. Rather more important is what I say about this lady following a programme. What is this programme? What does it say? What are its consequences? Why is it a problem? How do we go forward? And that's what this note will now focus on. Racism is taught. My first encounter with white privilege came in an unusual way. Instead of via the information of the interweb as some social issue being commented about, I met white privilege in the classroom, a university lecture hall no less. Now, no names, no patrol, and it wouldn't matter anyway. I was on a degree course for health and social care, and what I was taught in that university is assuredly taught in every single university in Britain without dissension, as a module of multiple courses. This was a communication module, 1/4 of a year-long course. So week in, week out, I went through the whole experience. It wasn't just communicating with other people, it was about communicating a whole load of social theory to me, and then getting me to demonstrate I had both comprehended it and put it into practice. Heard it all! Every single aspect of progressive ethics and diversity doctrine and practice delivered to me on the basis of safeguarding my clients' rights, but every bit of worldview I was not supposed to resist against. And with 10 grand invested in this course, and seeing there is no winning a fight even if I started one, I decided not to make this a battleground, and sat through the course, learning how I was supposed to see society, and showing that I comprehended that point of view. The fact that my heart was purple, that I was a UKIP supporter, and had this idea we would be better off outside of the EU, I jolly well kept to myself, because then I would have suffered prejudice if I had revealed it. Oh, how well I remember my lecturer declaring, the animal rights argument against halal butchery is invalid because we must not give ground to racist ideology, with a glare that dared the class to contradict her. I had raised the point in the first place, so gone as far as I could. Bad luck, cow, throat slashed and draining out, feeling every moment. Don't be racist now, cow. After all, we all bleed red. Animal rights, the long-term bastion of left-wing thought, sacrificed for the needs of the unreformed sky god, because we can't have neo-Nazis looking like they have a point. I face-palmed into my course workbook and soldiered on. I well remember when the white privilege lecture came up. Frankly, it is such an Orwellian artifice of institutional mind control, it's hard to know where to start. Here I am, white by name, white by nature, being told that it's all my fault that society is how it is. It's all my fault for what people did decades or even centuries before I was born, and not only that, the sins of my race were so bad, we must genuflect and apologise and give way with positive discrimination in favour of non-whites to make amends for the rest of our natural lives. At least, that's how I seem to understand what was actually being said, and I am not exaggerating the tone, it was a sermon. Let's see how white privilege chooses to present itself in a more considered form. Huffington Post ran this piece, explaining white privilege to a broke white person. I need to let these words speak for themselves, so here is a relevant quotation. When that feminist told me I had white privilege, I told her my white skin, didn't do shit to prevent me from experiencing poverty. Then, like any good educated feminist would, she directed me to Peggy McIntosh's now famous 1988 piece, White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. After one reads McIntosh's powerful essay, it's impossible to deny that being born with white skin in America affords people certain unearned privileges in life that people of other skin colours simply are not afforded. For example, I could turn on the television or open the front door page of a paper and see people of my race widely represented. When I am told about our national heritage or about civilization, I am shown that people of my colour made it what it is. If a traffic cop pulls me over, or if the IRS audits my tax return, I can be sure I haven't been singled out because of my race. I can, if I wish, arrange to be in the company of people of my race most of the time. If you read through the rest of the list, you can see how white people and people of colour experience the world in very different ways. But listen, this is not said to make white people feel guilty about their privileges. It's not your fault you're born with white skin and experience these privileges, but whether you realise it or not, you do benefit from it, and it is your fault if you don't maintain awareness of that fact. So, let's try and get a grip on this. The idea is that if you are white in the West, America, Britain, the EU, you have certain privileged advantages you may not realise you have that puts non-whites, either migrational or generational, at a systemic advantage, a disadvantage. This HuffPo article is trying to navigate the tricky territory where you explain to shit-poor, tough-as-old-boots white working class how they are privileged above anyone without their skin colour. This is, without a doubt, where white privilege has come under the fiercest criticism. In order to be white privilege, about the advantage of people who are white, instead of simply good old privilege, the privilegia, the private law, the rich, to cast that in a race politics mould, it is essential to persuade unprivileged whites that they occupy a rung up. The problem is, what would I expect through pure practical common sense? If a minority skin colour joins an alternate majority skin colour society, what should we expect to see? Why wouldn't we see, if in Europe or the US, white buildings made by white people occupied by white people? How is that privilege instead of just reality? A reality that changes day by day of its own accord. For life is change, and the more multiracial a society becomes, the less dominant by default the white proportion becomes. It's true, intolerant white people are angry and frightened about that. They fear the loss of self, of society as they know it to be. And that's nothing to do with being white either. That's just being human. Any group, any nation, would have similar concerns if they saw a big influx of a different culture. But that doesn't mean criticism of the ideology being used to artificially force that natural process is based on anger and fear. Rather, it can be based on true, spiritual, universal consciousness. Not fear, love, not hate, but freedom. The awareness of human freedom that does not need boxes and separations to forge true unity. Of course there is prejudice. Of course there is injustice. Of course there is intolerance. Of course there is privilege, both deserved and undeserved. But all of these terms stand on their own meanings. And the standard modern definition of racism is in fact prejudice plus power, the judgment based on superficial differences combined with the social structure to impose them. There can be no doubt apartheid South Africa was a profoundly racist society. It's arguable that Israel is today. But when such prejudice is not rampant, political correctness goes on witch hunts to uncover it, and has developed microaggressions where you can be racist without the faintest notion about it. A farce, I say. Phantom racists. Phantom fears. We don't need white privilege, or black prejudice, or yellow injustice, or brown intolerance, or any of this separation that moves us away from each other. For what else are we but projections from the same prism? We are spiritual beings having a human experience, not human beings having a spiritual experience, or even more, not human beings having a material existence. That's the spiritual view. There is no skin colour. What is it anyway but the final layer of the same amazing being? It's like two astronauts on a mission to the moon. One in a red spacesuit, the other in blue. They are both the same inside. There is an accident, and they are both knocked out. And when they come to, they don't remember who they are or how they got there. Then they mistakenly think each other is an enemy, and start fearing and fighting each other, lost in confusion, cut off from mission control. It's tragic. It's a farce. It's humanity and its lost connection, leading to error on top of error and a millennia of suffering from simple ignorance. Race, as a scientific concept, does not exist with regard to humanity. All humans, assuming fertile and right time of month, can breed with any other human of the opposite sex. Fact. There is so little difference in the genome, less than 1% variation, that defines the genetics of the whole human race. The difference between each of our genomes is statistically irrelevant. We are one race, one species. But what we are not is one culture, and perhaps we never should be. But it is culture that truly defines all race issues, not the existence of race, but the belief in race. Now, between cultures there's wide differences. Language, tradition, practices, identity, and the social engineers are right in one sense. Ultimately, they are all a choice. But they are a choice we do not think about making unless we rebel and seriously question how things are, how have they happened to be. That these are subconscious choices, and that makes them part of our subconscious psychology. When the question of unity is not paramount, when we see our differences and make judgments on them, not on the commonalities, we start to divide. And once we divide, we start to judge. And some will do better, and some will do worse. And then there is struggle between the two. But when live and let live and all muck along together as one society is the view, these divisions lose their relevance, and there isn't the pressure to fight for that identity. By and large, society has moved in this direction naturally, sure. Racism of a social issue, of course it needs to be challenged, especially since we know race is a cultural issue, not a genetic one. But the truth is, especially about the UK, we have blended so well together as British people, even though we think we're no good at it because of the media, Britain is without a doubt the most tolerant and harmonised culture in the whole of Europe. More than America, in fact. Britain is the least racist nation in the world. This is a marvellous thing, a great accomplishment. Yet there is much more to do, especially with racist views also being imported. But we continue to win the culture war in favour of unity and freedom. We have a lot to be proud of. We have come a long way, and we have learned to see our shared humanity, not everyone, but a truly large number of us. In human freedom, the UK does lead the way. The point I wish to make is that there is a wise, beautiful, free, open and simple way to view each other and the world. We don't need to complain about privilege while demanding privilege. We don't need to define ourselves by how we are different rather than how we are alike. We don't need to fracture into special interest groups that then compete with each other to gain more social dominance over others. These ideas were designed, perhaps, with good motives, to fight back against prejudice when it was out of control. But now they simply keep that old war going and never let it end. White privilege, political correctness, identity and politics. It's time they were decommissioned. It's time we rejected them and started choosing a better way. My country has already started this. As much as the advocates of the old ideas proclaim it a disaster, we are becoming an independent free nation again. Free Britain. If we work together to make it great, and give up on politics and perceptions of division, we can make a society that is a real prize, rewarding our years of struggle and actually solving the problems that plague people's lives. A fair country, with privilege of all kinds brought under control, and prejudice counted by fairness until it is let go. One set of rules, one free, democratic, secular law, one Bill of Rights, freedom for everyone as long as it does not impose. Justice for all. That is what I work for in all my efforts to make this world a better place. Now, who wants to call me a racist for being a white man called John White, in love with and lifelong champion of freedom and equality for all? And then there is this gentleman, Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States. Saviour of civilization to some, nightmare from hell to others. Now, We might talk about how the media has viciously demonised Trump. But leaving that aside, people have had a message fed to them about this man. He is racist, he is fascist, he is sexist, he is just mean and nasty and intolerant and prejudiced. And while we could say, but that's not who he really is, you shouldn't trust the news, we have to understand there are those who have believed what they have been told because they didn't realise to mistrust it. And to them, society has just gone mad electing this man. He is like literally Hitler. So the question is, why did people elect him? It turns out it's CNN who has an interesting answer. Because of white privilege. In the immediate aftermath of Trump's election win, CNN published an article. We need a PC that includes white people. It argues that it was the ham-fisted, overreaching imposition of white privilege and its ideological contradictions, creating tear-your-hair-out frustrations due to its arrogant impositions, that created the political circumstances that created Trump. Quotation. Many white people figure that they have gotten the message that they shouldn't stereotype that black people have a lousy history, that a lot of people aren't free of racist bias. But white people feel like they aren't bad people and are sick of being told that they are, no matter what they do. The idea that they are bearers of a white privilege for which they must endlessly apologise, no matter what they do or think, likely rankles especially. They feel damned if they do, damned if they don't. Of course, this is CNN, and it's welded to progressivism. So the article rose back this point into another cheer for race politics. But that is what makes this quote so important. If CNN, of all people, can admit it is white privilege and race politics, political correctness, that actually created the fuck it then reaction that drove Trump's grassroots mass support and swept the board of electoral college, which is what the right has been saying all along, then it's time to accept that that is true. Counter prejudice may balance prejudice for a while, but too much of it just becomes ideological bigotry, and people will reach a point where they have had enough. The political left cannot escape this responsibility. It created Trump by imposing its ideology unjustly and creating a counter-revolution. Of course, this is all ongoing. The agit-prop with the same failed race politics debating points are still being pushed today, driven by the same offensive and ultimately racist idea that whites are guilty because they are born white in cultures that have risen from a history of generations of people who were white, who gave body and soul to make the society they passed on to their descendants. The final own goal of the blame game. In the UK, we are not so divided. I can't say it's great, could be better, but it could be worse. And those who speak the extremist idea of hardcore race politics don't get unquestioning respect. In fact, there is strong pushback, while in the US media they are served up as fact day in, day out, and have been for years. But the doctrines, the ideas, are global and ultimately pushed by the money of the global elites. Same money, same protest groups, same strategy, same talking points, same failure, same problems. Globalist social engineering, getting it wrong. But to prove that, to prove there really is a better way, means to build a better society without those ideas. And that is the challenge of reaching for a world defined by our real human hearts. That challenge starts by criticising the ideas being pushed around us in the world today, But ultimately, it's for us to develop that higher consciousness within and stand for that vision, for true unity without prejudice and imposition. If we do not want our ideas to be fought for us, we have the duty to embody and stand for our own. So, if you see as I see, and will stand as I do, for freedom and justice for all humanity, then I ask you to consider what I say, and consign the failed concept of white privilege to the dustbin of dead ideology, in the interest not only of a fairer society that tackles real privilege and real prejudice by working together, but also to make that important choice to stop making it worse, to stop being part of a problem, and come together to find our solution and build our free world. Thank you for your time and attention and following these thoughts. Please check out links provided in the description below. Facebook doesn't play fair with my notes, so every share is very helpful, and if you see the note, please don't just like it, comment also to help it be seen. With much love, John White, out.